In the first two videos of this trilogy, we walked through 5 phases of financial freedom. The first exhale at $3,000, the recovery of dignity at $20,000, the building of character around $50,000, the arrival of optionality, and the slow softening of a future that used to be the enemy. If you followed me this far, you already understand more about money than 90% of people who reach $1 million without ever knowing how they got there. Today we go to the place almost nobody describes accurately. Phase 6 and Phase 7, where the math starts behaving like a magic trick, and where money, finally, stops being the central drama of your life. If this conversation is what you want more of, subscribe. Let's go. Phase 6 begins somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million invested. And here, something happens that I would call almost spiritual if it didn't have such mundane mathematical foundations. Your portfolio starts, contributing more to its own growth than you do. A portfolio of $600,000, growing at the historical average of 7% after inflation, generates roughly $42,000 per year in real, purchasing power-adjusted growth. Some years it grows by $100,000. Some years it falls by 60. But averaged across decades, that's the math. $42,000. That's, for a meaningful percentage of Americans, an entire year of take-home pay. Earned by money. While you slept, while you watched movies, while you drove your kids to soccer practice. The first time you understand this in your gut, not in theory, in your gut, it does something nobody warned you about. You feel a strange combination of emotions, part awe, part anger, part grief. The awe is obvious. The math is beautiful. Compound interest available to ordinary people is, in some sense, the closest thing to a financial miracle that's available without breaking the law. The anger is the anger of realizing this was always possible, that nobody told you in a way you could hear, that the industry had every incentive to make this seem complicated when it was actually almost embarrassingly simple. Save. Invest in something boring. Wait. The grief is for the years before you understood. And what comes after is the moment you realize that, from this point forward, time is on your side. For decades, you've been racing against the clock. Now the clock is racing for you. This is the central insight of Phase 6. The work changes hands. The portfolio takes over. And here's where the data becomes almost philosophical. The S&P 500 over the last 100 years has returned approximately 10% annually before inflation, with dividends reinvested. That spans the Great Depression, World War II, the inflation crisis of the 70s, the dot-com crash, 2008, and the pandemic. Through every catastrophe, the long-term curve held. But here's the part most people miss. Research. By the financial analytics firm Dalbar, which has tracked individual investor behavior for decades, has consistently found that the average investor in mutual funds significantly underperforms the funds themselves. The funds return 8 or 9% annualized. The average investor in those same funds returns 4 or 5. The gap is not because the funds are bad. It's because the investors panic. They sell at the bottom. They buy back at the top. The market is not the problem. The mind in front of the market is the problem. This is why the journey through the phases is so much more psychological than financial. At every phase, the temptation to panic, to upgrade, to chase the exciting story is enormous. The people who reach Phase 6 and 7 are not the people who never felt those temptations. They felt them all. They just didn't act on them. They kept buying. They kept holding. They let the math run. The most powerful financial education you can give yourself is not technical. It's not picking individual stocks. All of those, on average, perform worse than just buying a broad index fund and ignoring it. The most powerful financial education is learning to recognize, in real time, when your own mind is about to betray you, when fear is dressing itself up as caution, when greed is dressing itself up as ambition. Each of these will, at some point, walk up to you in a costume and try to get you to do something stupid. The people who reach the later phases have learned to recognize the costumes. They've built systems that protect them from themselves: automatic contributions, single low-cost portfolios, infrequent checking, refusal to watch financial news. This is one of the most underrated forms of self-knowledge available to an adult. The willingness to admit that you will panic when things get bad enough, will get greedy when things get good enough, need to be protected from yourself. This is what behavioral finance, after 50 years of research, has essentially distilled down to. Know yourself, build systems, be boring, stay invested, let the math run. The wealthy don't buy luxury, they buy slowness. Everything else is just the story other people tell themselves about why their lives are so loud. If this is landing for you, hit the like button. It helps this kind of conversation find the people who need it. Let's keep going. Because Phase 7 is where this whole journey was always pointing. Phase 7 is the phase that almost nobody describes correctly, because the people who reach it tend to stop talking about money entirely. This is the phase where money disappears as a category of concern, not because there's an infinite amount of it. People with hundreds of millions still talk about money. But Phase 7, for ordinary people who built ordinary portfolios over ordinary careers, is different. Phase 7 is when money simply stops being one of the variables you have to solve for in your daily life. It moves from the foreground to the background, from something you think about to something you don't. The dollar amount required varies more than any other phase because it depends entirely on what kind of life you've built. For someone who lives simply, a paid-off home, low fixed costs, Phase 7 can begin around $750,000. For someone with a high-cost lifestyle, it might not arrive until $2 or $3 million. What makes it Phase 7 is the internal condition of no longer needing to think about money. When someone reaches Phase 7, they have spent 2, 3, 4 decades carrying money in their attention, calculating, comparing, worrying, and now, almost suddenly, that mental thread can be released. The Germans have a word that comes close: Gelassenheit. It means something like serene composure, a relaxed, unhurried presence in the world, a trust that things will be okay, not because nothing bad will happen, but because you have built sufficient margin to survive the things that do. This is the texture of Phase 7, Gelassenheit. The people in this phase tend to look almost identical to people in much earlier phases from the outside. They drive normal cars. They live in normal houses. There's no Lamborghini, no yacht, no Instagram performance of wealth. Because the entire point of wealth, once you understand it, is to not have to perform anything. Researchers Thomas Stanley and William Danko spent decades studying high-net-worth individuals in their landmark research on the Millionaire Next Door. Their findings consistently showed something the culture refuses to absorb. The typical American millionaire drives a used car, lives in a house valued well below what they could afford, shops at warehouse stores, and is often mistaken by neighbors for someone of modest means. Real wealth, on average, hides. Performed wealth, on average, is leveraged. In Phase 7, you can read the signs in other people's lives almost instantly. The big house, with the financed everything. You see it. The friend with the expensive watch and the constant credit card stress, you see it. And in seeing it, you become almost entirely immune to its pressure. This is the deepest form of financial freedom available in the modern world. Not the freedom to buy whatever you want, the freedom to not want what you've been told to want, to opt out of the consumer arms race, to live quietly, by your own definition of enough. And this is where Phase 7 generates something unexpected. Generosity, not performative philanthropy, not the Instagram-friendly check presentation. Quiet generosity, paying for the friend's car repair without making it weird. Picking up the dinner bill without ceremony. covering the niece's tuition gap, tipping enormously at the diner where the waitress reminds you of your mother, donating, anonymously, to the food bank you used to use. This kind of generosity is one of the most reliable signs of someone in Phase 7, and almost nobody tracks it because it leaves no public record. But ask anyone who's ever been on the receiving end of a quiet, no-strings financial kindness. They remember it for the rest of their life. Real wealth is not the moment you can buy anything you want. Real wealth is the moment you stop wanting most of it. Now let's talk about what the entire journey was actually for. Real financial freedom, the kind that changes how you live, is not a single number. It's a state. It's the state of waking up without the small interior calculation about money that used to start your day. The state of going to the doctor when something hurts, instead of waiting and hoping it goes away. The state of taking the call from your kid in the middle of the day without flinching. What money can buy, when you understand it properly, is the conditions for inner change. Reduced fear creates conditions for patience. Patience creates conditions for clear thinking. Clear thinking creates better decisions. Better decisions create the life you actually wanted. The money is the soil. Your life is what you plant in it. And this is what nobody tells you in the financial literature. They give you the formulas for the soil, the percentages, the rates of return. They almost never tell you what to plant. Some people plant rest. They've spent decades being exhausted, and what they want more than anything is the right to be tired in peace. Some people plant work, but chosen work. They start the business they couldn't risk in their 30s. They write the book they always meant to write. Some people plant relationships. They reconnect with friends they'd been too tired to call. They show up for their parents in the final years. Some people plant generosity. They become the person quietly responsible for unexpected envelopes appearing at the right moment. Some people plant creativity. Painting, music, writing, things they were told were impractical when they were young, and that now, finally, can be impractical in peace. There's no correct planting. There's only the planting that fits the soil of the specific life you've been given. And the deepest question of financial freedom, the one almost nobody asks because we've been trained to think the question is about money, is actually this. What would you plant if you had the soil? That question is the real destination of the entire journey. I want to come back to where we started, 3 videos ago. If you've been with me through all 7 phases, you may already see yourself somewhere in this map. And whatever phase you're in right now, here's what I hope you take with you when this trilogy ends. The freedom is already here. Not waiting, here. In whatever phase you're in, right now. If you're in phase 1, your freedom is in the next deposit, the slow decision to keep going when nothing about it feels heroic. If you're in phase 2, your freedom is in the way you'll feel 6 months from now when you can say no to something you couldn't say no to before. If you're in phase 3, your freedom is in the character you're building, the character that will, 20 years from now, protect you from losing what you've built. If you're in phase 4, your freedom is in the no's you're now able to say. The toxic situations you can finally leave, the lifestyle you can refuse to inflate. If you're in phase 5, your freedom is in the lowered shoulders, the deeper sleep, the presence with the people you love. If you're in phase 6, your freedom is in the time you're now able to give yourself. The slow Saturdays. And if you're in phase 7, your freedom is in what you choose to plant. You are not waiting for financial freedom. You are walking through it, stage by stage, quietly, almost invisibly, most of it happening before anyone, including you, has noticed. The first million, when it comes, is not the start of freedom. It's the moment freedom finally becomes obvious to people who weren't paying attention. But you were paying attention. You felt it in your sleep, in your shoulders, in the small, slow shifts, in how you walked through the world. That's what these 3 videos were for. To tell you what you already knew, but maybe needed to hear someone else say. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're not failing. You are, right now, in the middle of one of the most important psychological journeys a human being in modern America can take. You were building yourself. The money was a side effect. The freedom was inevitable. That is wealth. Real wealth. The kind that no one can take from you, the kind that doesn't depend on the market, the kind that compounds silently inside you for the entire rest of your life. And it begins not at $1 million, but here, now, always now. It begins now. It always begins now. If any of this trilogy has landed for you, even one moment, even one sentence, tell me in the comments which phase you're in right now. Not your number. Not your salary, just the phase, the way it feels. Because someone scrolling a month from now is going to need to read what you write. They need to see they're not alone. If you found something valuable here, subscribe. There's more like this coming. Slower than the algorithm wants. More honest than the genre usually allows. Thank you for being here. Thank you for thinking about your life this carefully, when so much of the culture is designed to make sure you never do. You're closer than you've been told. The freedom started a long time ago. You just needed someone to tell you what to look for. Now you know.